Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us this afternoon for the Research Compliance Committee session. I know that for many of you, particularly those of you on the East Coast like I am, we are the only thing that stands between you and dinner and your jammies. So thank you for joining us for this discussion. We're going to have just a breadth of updates today from a variety of different committees. I'm joined by a lot of wonderful presenters. So next slide, please. So I guess I should have said, as Sarah mentioned, I'm Melissa Korf. I am the Director for Grants and Contracts at Harvard Medical School and also the co-chair for the Research Compliance Committee. Just a little bit of an agenda for today. We'll have a little bit of a committee overview, some updates from some great working groups and subcommittees, and then we'll move on for some closing remarks. Next slide, please. In co-chairing the Research Compliance Committee, just to give you a little bit of an overview of our current structure, I'm joined by Diane Dean from the NIH. And then we have various compliance subject matter specific subcommittees. So we have our Animal Care and Use Subcommittee, co-chaired by Ara Tamasian and Axel Wolf. A Conflict of Interest Subcommittee, co-chaired by Amanda Humphrey, Lindsay Spangler, and Diane Dean. We have our newest, I think it's 6 or 7 years old, subcommittee is the Data Stewardship Subcommittee, co-chaired by Chris Martin and Jen Welch. Our Export Controls Subcommittee, co-chaired by Doug Backman, and vacant. One of my goals for this year is that hopefully we'll get Doug someone to put in that vacant spot there. And the Human Subjects Subcommittee, co-chaired by Deb Murphy and John Bauman. Next slide, please. Just a high-level overview of our goals. We handle all things in the compliance space, and as consistent with FDP's overarching goals, we seek opportunities to develop best practices, reduce redundancies, strive towards consistency, with the ultimate goal of reducing burden on our researchers and our faculty. Right now, it includes the subcommittees that we have currently, but we could consider, and we have discussed in other sessions, whether or not it would make sense to add a different subject matter area to our work, really trying to be responsive to things like the faculty workload survey in identifying new opportunities for us to work towards reduction in administrative burden. Next slide, please. Those of you who have been in other sessions, notably the research administration session yesterday or the finance audit and costing session, we're trying out a new thing, thought exchange, which I suppose isn't 100% new. We have done some thought exchanges previously, but we exclusively use those in advance of the session as a way to gather some feedback that was then discussed during the session. We're trying out something new this meeting and doing these live thought exchanges, as sort of a live suggestion box as we're going through the session. And I think it's a really nice opportunity for a session like this, because you're going to hear about a lot of different things that's going on in the Research Compliance Committee, a lot of different things that are, well underway, nearing completion, just getting started. And we want to hear from you, your ideas on what are we not doing that would be really helpful to your institution, to you and your research, to you and your role as an administrator. So I see that Sarah just popped into the chat as well, the link to the thought exchange for today's session. And just as you go through the session and participate, if you could consider the question, what could the Research Compliance Committee do to help reduce burden in research compliance that we're not already working on, that you haven't heard in this session today, or expanding on something that you're hearing in this session today? If you go to that link for the thought exchange, it'll give you a little bit of an introduction. ask you for just a few demographic questions, and then you can just follow the prompts to enter your thought in response to that question or thoughts, and rank some of your colleagues. Please do be assured that any thoughts that you enter or any rankings are totally anonymous. You don't have to worry that if I've entered a thought and you give it a 1, that I'm going to know. So please give us your honest thoughts and honest rankings of other colleagues' thoughts, as this information will be invaluable to us as we consider our work plan for 2022 and moving forward. I put on the slide that we'll leave the thought exchange open for an hour, and then I considered the time of day. So we're going to go ahead and leave it open until tomorrow morning, just in case, as you're closing your eyes tonight, you think, oh, research compliance could do, feel free to jump back into that thought exchange and share your thoughts with us. Next slide, please. So one of the first updates we're gonna hear today is from I think I'm gonna get this right, the Compliance Unit Standard Protocol, the Cusp Project, led by Aubrey Schoenleben and Sally Thompson-Iritani from the University of Washington. They'll tell you a whole lot more about this, but just to give you sort of the Cliff Notes version, it's a really great database aimed at reducing administrative burden in animal care and use. So Aubrey and Sally, if you want to take it away.
Great, thank you, Melissa. Hi, everybody, I'm Aubrey. Next slide, please. So here's a little roadmap for the next 15 minutes that we have together to learn about the Cusp Project. So I'll start with just a really brief background just to give folks or to help orient folks that are not familiar with the project. We'll then discuss kind of the current state of the project, and I'm really excited to share with you a video demo that we have of our new site. So next slide, please. All right, so what is the Cusp Project? So the goal of this project really is to create an online venue where institutions can share standard procedures that are used in animal care protocols. And this is a burden reducing initiative of the 21st Century Cures Act. And we think that developing this sort of resource will help reduce burden not only for researchers, but also for Iakkoks and Iakkoks support staff by making it easier for researchers to get a high quality animal care protocol together and through the review process. Next slide, please. All right, so those of you that have been following along with this project for some time are probably very familiar with this slide. I use it often, but I do think it gives kind of a nice depiction of where the project's been since its inception way back in 2017. So we're currently in development. Back in May of 2021, we completed the build and testing of a beta site, which really just served as a prototype and a proof of concept. Shortly thereafter, we decided to transition that beta site over to a more modern technology stack. And that decision was motivated by 2 factors. The first really was FDP's strategic goals for phase 7. And as part of those goals, we wanted to modernize our Cusp site so that it could more easily communicate and integrate with other tools that FDP has developed or will be developing, such as the membership database. The other motivation for transitioning over to a more modern platform really is just for care and feeding of the site, if you will. It makes it much easier to maintain long-term if we're using a more modern language. So we were really, really fortunate to get some funding from NIH to help with this transition over to the more modern platform. And with those funds, we have been able to hire a dedicated development resource to help us with that. So over the summer, we engaged a new developer, Mark Nyland, to help us with this transition over to the modern technology stack. And he's done some really amazing work, as you'll see here in a few moments. And so currently we are getting ready to start our first round of user testing in the new site later this month, which I know there are many in the working group, myself included, that are really excited and have been chomping at the bit to get in to the new site and poke around and see how everything works. So very much looking forward to that. And so currently we're anticipating that we'll probably be able to complete the build of this new site this spring. But I think kind of the timing of that will refine and get a better sense of after we get through this first round of testing. So next slide, please. All right, so here is our video demo that Sarah is gonna start for us. It's about 9 minutes long, and I think it'll give you all a very nice overview of just kind of the features of the site, as well as some of the new functionality that has been added in, such as user dashboards.
Hi there. Now that you've heard about what the Cusp Project is and how you can implement this tool at your institution, we'd like to give you a peek at the new site. We'll be taking you through a brief demonstration of our test environment. We'll start our demonstration here on the login screen, where as a new user, you can request access. Clicking on the Request Access link will take you to a short smart form to complete. Submission of this form will prompt you to confirm your email address, allow you to affiliate with a given institution, and ultimately send your request to an institutional representative for review. If you already have an account, to access the site, you simply enter your email address and password. Forgot your password? Not a problem. Clicking on this link will allow you to securely reset your password by entering your email address. Now let's return to the home page, where we'll log in as an institutional representative for this demonstration. The representative is a user role in the site with read and write access. Users with this role can add new procedures and accounts to the system. Each institution will be required to have at least one user with this role. Once logged in, we'll land on the home screen, where you'll find a brief description of the project and access to help documents and FAQs. In the upper right-hand corner of the screen, you'll find a link to your user profile and the option to log out. Let's take a look at the user profile. Within the user profile, you'll find basic information such as the user's full name, email address, and title, which they can edit and modify from this screen. Users will also be able to update their institutional affiliation and include additional contact information, such as an alternate email address if they wish. The user profile also provides the option to update the password associated with the account and access to some additional security features, such as two-factor authentication and visibility into active browser sessions. Users can also delete their account from this page if they choose. Now, let's scroll up to the top and return to the home page. From here, we'll access the procedure database by clicking Let's Get Started. The body of the procedure page includes a table of all procedures in the system. The table displays some basic information about each procedure, including the number of endorsements, the name, which institution added that procedure to the site, the procedure type, which is a general organizational category, such as euthanasia, species, and actions that can be performed from this page. Data within the table can be easily sorted by clicking on the title of each column. Now let's take a look at a procedure record by clicking the View icon, which will open a slide-in window. From within the procedure record, users can bookmark their favorites, endorse the procedure, flag procedures for review, print, or download that procedure. Users will have two options for searching for procedures within the database. The first option that users will have to search the site are pick lists, which include broad categories such as procedure type or species that will allow the users to select attributes of interest to them. So for example, we can select the species mouse, and the table will populate with procedures related to our selection. The second option is a simple free text search, where you can enter keywords or phrases of interest to you. So for example, if we wanted to look for procedures related to operant conditioning, we can enter the search term box, and the table will populate with procedures related to our search term. Now, let's take a look at some of the dashboards available to the institutional representative. The first dashboard is related to procedures. Representatives can click on the tile to see procedures within each category. Let's click on the active tile. This will bring up a table of active procedures associated with my institution, where I can view, edit, archive, and delete procedures from this screen. Let's edit a procedure. Clicking this icon will open up the procedure smart form. You'll see that the smart form is a single scrollable page that allows you to save modifications within each section. The procedure description includes a rich text field that allows users to format the text and include special symbols. The smart form includes a section to define the procedure type, which are those broad organizational categories that I mentioned. In this example, we have a procedure that describes the use of anesthesia in pigs. So we'll select options related to the substance administration procedure type and then save our edits. The user can also define various attributes related to that procedure, including keywords and substances from within the smart form. Both of these fields will feed into that free text search that we saw on the procedure page. In this particular example, since it's an anesthesia procedure, we'll add the anesthetic fluorothane as a new substance by entering that term into the new substance field and clicking the add icon. In a similar manner, we could add keywords related to this procedure. So in this example, we'll add two keywords, malignant hyperthermia and surgery, again by entering those terms into the new keyword field and clicking the add icon. Users can also easily remove keywords or substances related to that procedure by clicking the X next to the term that they want to remove and then saving their changes. Now, if we scroll back up to the top and return to the procedure dashboard, let's view that anesthesia procedure that we modified. Opening up that procedure record, we can see that the edits that we incorporated are now within the procedure record. Back on the procedure dashboard, you can see several other categories such as inactive procedures, which includes procedures that have been archived. From here, you can easily reactivate a procedure by clicking the recover icon. If we go back to the dashboard, we can see that our recovered procedure is now within a draft state. So we'll click on the draft tile. From here, you can see that our activated procedure can be edited by clicking the edit icon. So we'll scroll down and we'll make some modifications to our procedure. In particular, we'll remove keywords and substances that were originally associated with the procedure. Save our modifications. We're going to scroll back up to the top, and now we'll publish our procedure. Back in the dashboard, you can see that the number of active procedures has now increased to 4, and that our blood sampling procedure is listed in the table of active procedures. Now, let's take a look at the user account dashboard. Similar to the procedure dashboard, clicking the active tile will populate the table with active accounts. From here, I can view details, disable the account, or delete the account. Let's take a look at an account record. Here, like the profile, you'll see basic information associated with that user's profile, the ability to assign system roles such as community member or institutional representative, the ability to reset passwords associated with the account, and the ability to update related contact information such as an alternate email address or mailing address. In this example, let's update the city and state associated with this particular account. We'll now scroll up to the top and return to our user dashboard. Now you can see that the number associated with contacts has increased to 1 since we've added additional contact information for one of our accounts. Clicking on this tile will allow us to easily view these details associated with those accounts. Returning to the dashboard and our list of active users, If we look at our table, we also have the option now to delete user accounts if we choose by clicking that trash can icon. Once that account is deleted, you can see that it moves from an active state to an inactive state. Opening up the inactive tile, we can also easily recover those accounts by clicking the appropriate recover icon. The last section that I'd like to share with you is the About page. On the About page, you'll find a description of the project and related disclaimers for using this site. Well, that concludes our demonstration. I hope you've enjoyed taking a look at the updated Cusp site, and we look forward to working with you on this project. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So hopefully that gives everybody a good sense of where we are with development. The user interface in particular, I'm a big fan of. It's nice and slick and clean. And we'd love to hear everyone's feedback on the new site so we can pass that on to our developer as well. I know he's very curious. So feel free to enter comments in the chat, or you can email me directly later. That's fine. And so a few other updates here. While Mark has been hard at work on development, our working group has also been working to develop the necessary infrastructure to support the site once we're live. So I just wanted to highlight a few of those activities for everyone. So our steering committee has developed a user participation agreement that outlines expectations for both individual users as well as institutions that will participate in the Cusp site. And it defines the role of the working group kind of once we're in a live a live state, kind of what their role is to support the site, as well as what the site can and cannot do. Our help desk team has been hard at work creating documentation to help new users of the site, including developing some FAQs. And I know they're tossing around the idea of developing some help videos as well, most likely short little snippets for discrete tasks to help, I guess, visually guide users on how to do certain things within the system. Our quality control or QC team has been focusing their efforts on developing a survey to collect feedback from our user community. This will be both general feedback from users so that we can continue to refine the site over time to make sure that it meets our community's needs, but also collecting data that's been requested by NIH in connection with the support that we are receiving. And so this is data like number of users, kind of if this tool is impacting burden, that sort of information will also be included in that survey. Our tech team has been outlining a process for reviewing bug fixes and enhancement requests, and they've been doing a great job with it. It's a surprisingly simple and transparent process, which I'm a huge fan of. So big kudos to them on that. And then as a whole, the working group has also been starting to draft a rollout plan. So as we get closer to go live, we are starting to kind of map out how we want to roll that out to the FDP community and to the community at large. I guess next slide, please. And I guess this is just some resources for folks. Our education and outreach team has done a nice job of updating the webpage for our working group on the FDP website. So I encourage folks to go there to get more information about the project. And our general email is just cusp@thefdp.org. So don't ever hesitate to use that email if you have general questions about the project, or if you want to volunteer. We're always looking for more help because, you know, more hands make light work. So, you know, so if you're interested, we'd be more than happy to have you. I guess next slide, please. Oh, next slide. Oh, yeah. Yeah, and again, I'm just plugging any questions or discussion items, you know, feel free to reach out to myself or to my compatriot Sally. She's a co-chair for the Cusp Project, either directly or through the Cusp email. And I guess with that, if there's time, I'm happy to take questions now, or we can do that at the end. I don't want to steal time from other committees that are doing great work.
So Aubrey, I entered one question in the chat, and I see that we
Sure.
have one also related question. So the Cusp site, will it only be available to FDP member institutions, or we're allowing access beyond FDP? And then sort of related to that, the second question was, if it's available to folks outside of FDP, what would prevent an animal rights activist from getting access to the site as a user, and using that information for other than its intended purpose?
Yeah, so because we are NIH funded, it will be a publicly available tool. We will be rolling out the site in phases though. So initially it'll be available to FDP member institutions only. And then once we've onboarded all institutions within FDP that are interested in joining, then we'll open it up to other institutions. The particulars of that rollout plan we're still kind of figuring out. Currently, to join the site, an institution, a member needs to be part of an institution to join the site. So there will be some vetting, I guess, that goes on with joining the site, because you have to email us that Cusp general email address and kind of get set up in the site, because each institution will be expected to have what's called a designated institutional representative, which will be responsible for kind of uploading procedures to the site and kind of helping to maintain user accounts. So I think as part of that process, there'll be a little bit of vetting just to ensure that the folks that are requesting access are who they say they are. I think though, long term, the site I think will be publicly available, and we are working to develop a user role that would just be a public member. And that would be strictly kind of a read-only access role, although the details of all that we're still working through what that is. So I guess to answer Roger's questions there's really no way ultimately to prevent an animal rights activist from getting access to the site, that we are doing what we can to implement security features like single sign-on and other things like that to help mitigate that as much as we can. I hope that helped. Any other questions?
I think that was great, Aubrey. It sounds like at least in the immediate term, an institution joins and then can designate individuals to join. So in the immediate term, that is a pretty good mitigation strategy. I don't see any other questions in the chat. So maybe we can go ahead and move along. But if anyone thinks of anything down the road, we'll have some opportunity for wrap-up questions at the end. And just another plug for the Thought Exchange. I see that Sarah added the link to the chat again. So please do share your thoughts with us.
Thank you.
All right, well, we'll hand this off to Carrie Godin and Amanda Humphrey now for an update on the Iakkomou MOU working group.
Great, thank you, Melissa, and thank you, Aubrey. That looks really exciting. So welcome to the Iakkomou MOU working group. We just wanted to provide a little update. Next slide, please. So we have 4 co-chairs, Carrie Godin at Brown University, myself, Amanda Humphrey from Northeastern, Ara Tamasian from Harvard University, and Axel Wolf from OLA. The goal of this working group has been to reduce administrative burden through the creation of an Iakkomou MOU sample for FDP member institutions when collaborating on projects involving the use of vertebrate animals. Next slide, please. So how did we come about stumble upon this project, and it started actually a couple of years ago. We started getting questions about whether or not the subaward met the requirement in the guide for the MOU requirements that were articulated in the guide. Next slide, please. And so as we dove into those requirements, we noticed that there was a requirement for a formal written understanding, such as a contract, memorandum of understanding, or agreement that institutions could use between themselves to designate and delegate responsibility for the care and use of vertebrate animals on any work that is supported by NIH or other federal agencies that have adopted the OLAW guidance. So there was a lot of confusion at first, because I think we were speaking across the subawards world and then the Iakkomou world. And eventually, as we started parsing through all of that information, we realized that some institutions were using the memorandum of understanding as opposed to, say, a formal contract or agreement. It was maybe a slightly more informal document. And that seemed to be the best place to start with, rather than just jumping into adding a term or condition into the subaward, especially based on the fact that we had so many institutions where the business operations of the central office and the office of the Iakkomou were very separate tracks, and they didn't even talk to each other through systems or otherwise. That might not be the best first step, and the best first step might just be, how do we understand what an MOU sample is? How do we make a useful product? And then maybe we can go from there onto the next steps. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Carrie, who's going to walk us through the work that we've done.
Thanks, Amanda. Next slide, please. So first and foremost, I actually just want to take a step back and thank this working group. We have been meeting every other week for a considerable amount of time with an extremely high level of engagement and with great diversity, I would say, in the types of institutions that participated, were really engaged. We had some wonderful engagement from representation from the USDA and the VA. So I just want to start by acknowledging how many individuals we had engaged in this working group. I'll skip this first bullet, which speaks to what Amanda has already covered. I think importantly, what we've been working on for a fairly significant amount of time is really taking all of your feedback that you provided as the FDP community in the spring of last year. And we received some really helpful and I would say critical but important feedback from you as our community members, both from public institutions and private institutions. And that was really helpful to us. So we took those original documents and we actually walked through point by point every single comment that we received from you as our community. And rest assured that if you submitted comments, they were actually really thoughtfully considered, sometimes debated, and many of your comments actually resulted in edits to the documents as they were originally circulated. So we're really hopeful that you see some real change from the first iteration of these documents to the sample guidance and template that we're going to roll out to you soon. If you don't mind going to the next slide. So where we are now. So we anticipate rolling out both the sample MOU document and some corresponding guidance to the FDP community next month, assuming that we get the green light from our FDP leadership. And critically from there, we're working on a communication and rollout plan We're going to use an FDP webinar to kind of walk through the documents in great detail, train anyone who's interested in how to use it, answer any questions that we've not articulated in the guidance document, where we do have a fairly robust set of FAQs. Our goal then subsequent to that is to try to engage some other societies, professional societies like the 3I's, and other local distribution through regional listservs, the Iakkomou network, via Yammer, and other channels that might reach relevant audiences. And we also welcome you to contact us if we've missed anything, any big groups or audiences that you think would benefit from learning more about using these documents. And I wanted to just call out, importantly, in some ways, this is a pilot. So these are living documents, and we fully recognize and acknowledge that they are going to be imperfect when put into use. So we really want to encourage you, as you have use cases, whether it worked really well or it wasn't so smooth, we welcome all of those types of feedback so that we can make sure that kind of this live document or these live documents evolve over time so they best suit all types of organizations and their collaborations. And I will say one last thing before I leave you, which is that we really focused these documents on being cross-institutional collaboration. We are fully aware that we don't talk and touch upon some of the more complex relationships that might exist. So for example, domestic and international collaboration, we acknowledge we've not yet thought about how best to tackle that. And we also really focused on making these kind of project specific with some flexibility built in if you have multiple projects, but really did not intend to really tackle the bigger or broader issue of maybe you want cross-institutional overarching MOUs that you develop with frequent collaborators. So those are things that are on our minds for potential future projects.
And just to add one other thing, when this rolls out, to Carrie's point that we're looking at this more as a pilot, it is a sample, so institutions will have greater flexibility to modify the document as they need to in a specific use case. As Carrie was indicating, it's not, we know that it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all document, especially at the outset. So I think really using the word sample consistent with the way that we use it on the subaward subcommittee as something that is a little bit more of a flexible document will hopefully help people in their adoption of it.
We're happy to answer questions.
So Amanda and Carrie, thank you so much for this update and all of the wonderful work that this working group has done. I'm really excited for the final rollout. I don't see any questions in the chat at the moment, but there was a pretty robust discussion on Cusp in the chat afterwards as well. So if folks maybe just need a minute to think of their questions or their comments, I encourage anyone if they think of something later to still go ahead and share that in the chat. But we'll move on to Deb and John for an update on the Human Subjects Subcommittee. Will you do next slide, please, Sarah?
Trying. Do I have my speaker on? Good afternoon, everyone. We're excited to be here virtually again and hope that you're having a safe and happy new year. I'm joined today by John Bauman, who is the Associate Vice President for Research Compliance at Indiana. So we're going to give you a very brief update today about where we're standing with the work we've been doing since the last meeting in the fall. We're going to talk a little bit about the role of the subcommittee and what our focus areas for the coming year are. John, do you have any comments, opening comments?
Nope, just everybody, hope you have a better 2020 than we had a 2021.
Next slide. Wanted to reintroduce our subcommittee members who I believe are with us here today. Marietta Marsh from the University of Arizona, Rachel Wenzel from the University of Nebraska, Sarah, whose last name I always butcher, so I won't say it, from Dana-Farber.
Cascadian.
Thank you, John. And Michelle Strickler from the University of Texas at Austin. I think you all know, but we'll give you a refresher. The Human Subjects Subcommittee is part of the programmatic umbrella of the Research Compliance Committee, which we all belong to. We're charged with revising new and administrative requirements for human subject protection programs. Our emphasis, intended emphasis, focuses on the harmonization of requirements with the federal regulation, reduction of redundancies, and helping us all to work together to identify some best practices. Next slide. I don't think this is the next slide. Next slide. Back up. So we're missing some slides here. I don't know how that happened, but I have them printed out so I can kind of go through them. We'll get the balance of the missing slides back to the committee so they can be posted for everyone. I just need to flip through some pages. So during and after our fall meeting, we really did work to identify the focus areas that we wanted to focus in on, and we identified 5 areas of improvement to investigate. We want to investigate exemptions and limited IRB review and approval, and look, as part of that, look at a little bit the use of an exempt wizard. We want to talk about oversight in the absence of continuing review requirements. Of course, single IRB is a hot topic, and we wanted to talk about informed consent and data sharing. At the last meeting, we did a lot of calls for volunteers. We got a few, and we convened our subcommittees with starting discussions. We didn't get nearly, I'm just going to speak bluntly, we didn't get nearly the amount of participation that we were hoping for. So what's new is we're going back now to regroup, not regroup on our focus areas, but really regroup to consolidate the 4 into 2 working groups. And we're looking to piggyback or work with the data sharing group on the informed consent process for stewardship of data retention. I'm sure that John has a few things to add to that, and we're happy to take questions, but do any of the subcommittee members here have anything they'd like to add to those brief discussions of our focus? I don't know if we're getting any questions coming in. We do want to thank those of you who are volunteering to help us. We believe it's important work. We're really looking to focus in on making an improvement in the near term and long term for facilitating research for our investigators and streamlining processes and procedures for the staff and the committees who do the work of protecting human subjects.
No, I think you gave a good summary, and I think when we initially anticipated being able to staff 4 working groups, we were a bit ambitious. Obviously, we're still open to anybody who's interested. Each of the subcommittees have had a tentative meeting, or had one scheduled. One had to be canceled because of a personal situation. But we hope to be pretty assertive and proactive during the coming year in developing a framework for carrying out at least 2 of those 4 areas. Well, with that, we will defer the remaining of our time
to the next group.
Thank you so much, Deb and John. I'm really excited to see the outcome of those new working groups. It's convenient that data stewardship follows you both, as I believe there is some opportunities for collaboration between the two subcommittees as it relates to data sharing and consent issues, which is really exciting. Like I said, I don't see any questions in the chat right now, but sometimes it seems like folks just need a minute to digest some of the information and share their thoughts. So I encourage anyone that has thoughts or questions to go ahead and pop those in the chat, as well as, any other suggestions for, groups to add to our work plan. We'll hand it off now to Chris Martin and Jen Welch, who are the co-chairs for the Data Stewardship Subcommittee.
And I will send you the full slides again.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris Martin. I'm with Jennifer Welsh. We want to welcome you on behalf of the Data Stewards Subcommittee. We want to express our gratitude to the individuals that have worked on these efforts that we're going to present on, and for everyone's contributions in advancing the goals and objectives of the Data Stewardship Subcommittee. Let me just go through. Since the last FDP meeting, we've heard feedback from membership, and we are diligently working in establishing cross-committee working groups to address many of these items. In the September FDP meeting, the NIH was kind enough to present on their new data sharing plan. Starting in January 25th, 2023, so next year, the NIH will require researchers to prospectively plan on how scientific data will be preserved and shared through submission of data management and sharing plans. These plans will need to outline how scientific data and any accompanying metadata will be managed and shared, taking into account any potential restrictions or limitations. The NIH expects that these plans will maximize the appropriate sharing of scientific data while acknowledging certain factors that may affect the extent to which scientific data are preserved and shared, such as legal, ethical, and technical restrictions. Part of the new NIH data sharing policy that has received the most concern is how institutions can capture the costs associated with their plans. Though the costs are a driving concern, decisions regarding the stewardship of the data may have material impacts on these costs and plans. For example, the guidance on how data needs to be maintained is imprecise. The NIH references data retention requirements proffered by journals and other sources as being persuasive, but has not identified anything dispositive or authoritative yet on this subject. As such, when data needs to be destroyed is not determined at the time of submission or during the course of the project, this can greatly impact what the ultimate cost would be of the project. We are actively engaging and working with the FTP Finance, Audit, and Costing Committee in the creation of a working group to address the NIH data sharing policy. We anticipate that this will yield guidance grounded in sound costing and audit principles without sacrificing each university's obligation as data stewards that it possesses. Next slide. The next working group we want to work on is on the future use of data, and this is what just teased by Deborah and John. We've noticed, and I'm sure every member has noticed, that year over year, each institution has probably seen substantial increases in the amount of data use agreements that they process. As a role as the provider of data in any of these instances, the initial step is to ensure that there's a clean sheet of title to the data that is being actually presented or shared with the other party. In conversing with other members and other institutions, it seems the gross consensus is that the informed consent is the most impactful document determining whether or not data can be shared with any other party. I'm sure most people have seen or had experiences where they've reviewed informed consents, where the entirety of the document specifies how secure and private the data will be. And then there's a little provision somewhere in the document that says, but it may be used for future research purposes. There's an inherent conflict with such a thing, with such a problem, because then the reasonable person would not have the same interpretation of the informed consent as a strict interpretation of the actual document. With the increased scrutiny of the data, thanks in part to the new NIH data policy, Clarity on the future use of data is crucial to the successful deployment of these new data sharing policies underneath the NIH. We are actively working with Human Subjects Subcommittee in developing a working group, or expanding really a working group. The desire is to identify best practices and the development of the informed consent. Next slide. This next effort is from the Data Stewardship Subcommittee is unlike the other two previously mentioned. It is not prompted by a reflexive need, but rather an anticipatory foresight by the Data Stewardship Subcommittee. It is reasonably foreseeable that within the coming years, members will be presented with what to do with data after it is envisioned that their use will have eclipsed what they need to use it for. And then this will pose ethical, legal, and contractual considerations on what to do with the data. We're thinking that this guidance will also encompass and be useful for repositories that may retain large data sets that have no current scientific interest. It is questionable whether data, especially versions where it could be considered the only remaining instance of the data set, should potentially go through a deascensioning process like other potentially creative works, if you want to consider data a creative work. In a related context, when data is received by an institution through a DTUA, many times at the end of the useful use of the data, it requires destruction of the data. That destruction requirement is sometimes imprecise because we have to make sure that or account for that to maintain an auditable trail, and then to address potential unknown backup archival copies and safe cloud computing instances. The objective of this internal group is to explore federal and commonly accepted practices and provide useful insights on how a party can balance the ethical, auditable, and destruction requirements. We suspect that the use or the results from this working group will be useful for the membership and in the preparation of their respective NIH data sharing and management plans, and how repositories responsibly can maintain their collection in a way that is cost effective, but still meet the NIH and every university's needs to data retention. Next slide. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Jennifer.
Thanks, Chris. Hey, everyone. I'm just going to provide a few updates for the Data Transfer and Use Agreement Working Group. So early last year, Diana and Chris took on the roles of co-chairs for the working group, and they've just been doing a really magnificent job at moving the group's goals forward. They have meetings every other week, and they've just been working really hard. They sent out a new call for volunteers, and 35 participants responded to that call, which is a big number. And that includes 8 returning working group members. The DTUA FAQs were updated, and version 2 was uploaded to the Data Stewardship website last year. There was also a survey done of the new participants of the working group to determine the greatest needs for their institutions. And the responses clearly indicated that an updated and expanded guidance document was a top priority. And the second highest priority was refining the DTUA templates, which were previously approved and are currently available on the Data Stewardship website. The working group actually just finalized discussions on a new guidance flowchart to assist with determining when a DTUA is required or recommended for a research purpose. And it's going to be polished and disseminated for the usual vetting process very soon. And last Friday, the working group began work on its next topic, providing guidance on non-human subjects determinations. So when research and the data being shared does not involve human subjects versus when the data is de-identified human subjects data. Next slide, please. So we have future goals for the working group. That includes planning to create a smart PDF for the DTUA template, something with easily fillable and usable fields. So if any volunteers have skills to develop a smart PDF and would like to assist, please reach out. Chris and Diana will be in touch. There are also plans to work towards a version 2.0 of the one-way DTUA in the future. The one-way DTUA is used when data is being shared between one provider and one recipient. And the working group anticipates a 2-stage effort for this. The first stage is going to take shape after language for the subaward attachment 7, which is data sharing terms, is fully approved. The working group is going to then examine if further alignment is needed and appropriate between the subaward language and the attachment 2 options. And for anyone who doesn't know, attachment 2 is selected based on the data type being shared under the D2A. So that's limited data set, de-identified data, HIPAA data, FERPA data, anything else I forgot. And any changes from this first stage would be limited in scope. So the second stage would be a full review of the one-way D2A to ensure that the terms remain current with evolving best practices. Next slide, please. The working group is hoping to present during a session in May 2022 and discuss distribution of the finalized flow chart, determining when a D2A is required or recommended for a research purpose. They're also hoping to preview draft guidance on non-human subjects determinations versus de-identified human subjects data. Please stay tuned for those announcements about May. And then final slide. Housekeeping items. If anyone is interested in anything Chris and I have just talked about for the Data Stewardship Subcommittee or any of the working groups, please register for the Data Stewardship listserv. We're going to be sending out a call for new volunteers from there. And finally, if you currently visit our Data Stewardship Subcommittee website, it's just the DTUA working group, but we have goals for that website. We're ultimately planning for it to have information about the Data Stewardship Subcommittee with separate subpages for the working groups, including the DTUA working group, so that everyone has easy access to all the information that they need. And we're hoping to have more information about this in the near future, so please stay tuned for that as well. And that's it for Chris and I and the Data Stewardship Subcommittee.
All right, thank you so much for this update on those great working groups that you're kicking off, and the DTUA, which will always be near and dear to my heart. I feel a little empty nest syndrome, and on all of the great work that Diana and Chris are taking on. Next slide, please, Sarah. We'll go ahead and pass off to Amanda Humphrey and Lindsay Spangler, who are the newest co-chairs of one of our subcommittees in the Research Compliance Committee. Those of you who might have been familiar with previous leadership of this subcommittee, Mary Lee from Stanford had been the co-chair, and she moved back to private practice, and we put out a search for new co-chairs, and Lindsay and Amanda rose to the top from some of their other contributions. So please join me in welcoming Amanda and Lindsay to their first meeting as co-chairs of the COI subcommittee, and for their update.
Thank you, Melissa. I'm excited. This is my first opportunity to co-chair a committee for FTP. I've been attending the meetings for a couple of years now, so I'm excited to get more involved. If you can go to the next slide. So as Melissa mentioned, Amanda and I are the new co-chairs. And while this was an existing committee, we have engaged new committee members based on the volunteer sign up from last year. And so we looked at the list, and we pulled people from different types of institutions and roles. We have faculty, directors of COI, compliance, information systems, just various roles that we think will provide really good insight and different perspectives that we need on this committee. And we actually have our first meeting next week. So hopefully at our next meeting, we'll have a little bit more substance there once we really dig in and get working. Next slide. So the current scope of the COI subcommittee is to reduce administrative burden in conflict of interest related matters. So I know that right now the hot topic is outside activity disclosures. And this is certainly intertwined with COI reporting, but these sort of disclosures are being looked at and worked on by the Foreign Influence Working Group. So we don't want to necessarily overlap or create confusion with that group. And fortunately, Amanda is on the Foreign Influence Working Group Committee and is going to keep us apprised of their progress so that we can make sure that we're working in tandem with that group. And then we'll obviously continue to monitor changes that come out as a result of the latest NSPM 33 guidance, which, much like Lori mentioned, I'm one of the flaggers who's read it many, many times. So you know, have my eyes on that as well. But I think, you know, right now, one of the things we're thinking about is the most effective way to frame our committee. And COI, again, with this guidance, COI is really at the forefront of some of our other research security and integrity matters. So we are exploring ways to ensure we're incorporating some of these larger issues into the planning of our committee, and looking at the different projects that are going to provide us the most benefit. I know Amanda and I were batting around a few ideas on our last call, just issues we've seen or that we've heard other institutions have, such as, you know, dealing with COI issues with SBIRs, STTRs, the FCOI clearinghouse, reviewing, of course, the existing or potentially changing agency policies related to COI. So I think, you know, after we meet with our committee next week, we do hope to form some different working groups once we have some of these issues, kind of figure out what people are interested in and form working groups. And so if you did not put your name on the list last year, expressing interest in a committee, but perhaps you might be interested in participating on one of these working groups, certainly reach out to us. We do have a list and we would love to have more involvement if you have a particular interest in COI. See, I'm trying to think. Amanda, did you want to weigh in on some of this?
Yeah, thank you, Lindsay. I think that's a great overview. And we did have we had a lot of volunteers the last year, and we're hoping to reach out to them when we do solidify what some of our working groups will be. I think we just want to have a conversation with our potentially core committee, and then hopefully we'll be doing some outreach to the broader community and saying, well, what projects are useful? How should we define what this committee does, and is there a new way to think about this committee and its role, as Lindsay was saying, in the scope of the broader research security and integrity, because COI certainly dovetails with both of those areas in a lot of ways.
So I was noticing no one had really put anything in the thought exchange yet. So I don't know if anyone wanted to speak up or give any input now on sort of any ongoing COI things that you would like us to address. Because again, our first meeting with the committee is next week. So it would be a great time to let us know sort of areas where you would like to see us focus so that we could kind of find the right people to lead some of the working groups. Don't everyone speak at once.
That might be, sorry, I'm keep trying to turn on my video and my finger is clicking too fast. So it might be a good segue for us to go ahead and look at the thought exchanges. I actually did see one suggestion related to conflict of interest and mitigation between institutions. So COI mitigation MOU templates are best practices, harmonizing responses to disclose COIs between institutions. You know, perhaps there's, with all of this focus on research security, I know that one of the things that we're thinking about is the sort of the best way when we do have a subrecipient relationship, perhaps, to make sure that, you know, the PTE is sharing the best information with the federal agency sponsor and has just sort of the right amount of information. So maybe there are some opportunities there as looking at that particular issue when there's a a collaboration between institutions. And thank you so much, Sarah, for pulling up the thought exchange here. And just as a reminder, we're going to leave this open for a little while, at least until tomorrow morning. So if you think of anything now, feel free to share that with us. If you think of something later, please go ahead and add that into the thought exchange, or of course, you know, any of the contact information that we've shared throughout the session today. But it looks like, you know, a lot of suggestions related to cybersecurity requirements, or a lot of positive votes in that. And just as Lindsay mentioned, and you know, we're definitely aware of making sure that we're maintaining compliance. We're always maintaining compliance. We're research compliance, maintaining coordination with the Foreign Influence Working Group and KIC and KIC and MART, right? Yes, KIC and MART. And moving forward and making sure that we're remaining harmonized. Oh, here's a good one: organizational conflict of interest, and trying to make sure that we're reducing burden on institutions, trying to comply with these widely disparating organizational conflict of interest requirements. I see one up at the top there that's just been kind of, I think, upvoted. You know, visitors, dealing with visitors to campuses, sample foreign visitors to campus policies, you know, especially for small schools that don't have the same infrastructure as larger institutions. How can they still welcome the foreign visitors that we all, you know, need for the success of our research programs, but feel confident that they're maintaining compliance? Oh, a COI matrix. That one isn't interesting. Taking maybe a look back at some of the COI model policies. These are some great suggestions. Thank you for everyone who's sharing these, and please feel free to continue to do that. Maybe we could go back to the slides, Sarah. We'll be sure to take a look at the thought exchange results, and potentially share some of the results with the committee, and or definitely make sure that the relevant subcommittees are taking a look at those results and thinking through, you know, what their subcommittees might be able to take on in that space. Great, thank you so much. So as some other subcommittees have mentioned in providing their updates, one of the best ways to stay up to date on all of the great work that we've got going on is to join our listserv. And also, please don't hesitate after you join the listserv to share what you've got going on. This is a great community with a lot of folks always willing to help out and share how their institution might have tackled an issue, or even just shared commiseration in terms of like, I saw that too, and I'm struggling with the same thing. And that's also a great way for us to identify opportunities for new working groups or demonstrations to help keep moving forward our mutual goal of reducing administrative burden. Right now, the listservs that we have available to sign up for are a general research compliance committee listserv, one for animal care and use, data stewardship, but we're working on making sure that we're standing up listservs dedicated for each one of the subcommittees in the research compliance committee. Next slide. So this is my contact information. If you were really interested in something that you saw over the session today, but couldn't remember who the co-chair was or who it was that was speaking about that thing that you were interested in, please feel free to reach out to me, and I'm happy to match you up with the right group and make sure that we're sharing opportunities. And also, one of the things that we're hoping to do is liven up the Research Compliance Committee webpage. It's going to be another great opportunity to get more updates on what it is that we've got going on, and also make sure that if you're interested in a subcommittee or a working group, that you know who to reach out to. So I think with that, unless, you know, anyone has questions or comments or anything they'd like to share, you might all be able to get into your jammies 19 minutes early today.